A cold May morning in 1536, the bells of London fell silent. Official records tell us that Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, was led from her prison cell inside the Tower of London to a scaffold built specially for her execution. She walked calmly, her eyes fixed straight ahead, and in a single stroke, her head fell into the straw. That fact is written clearly in Tudor chronicles. But here's the contradiction. For nearly 500 years, countless night watchmen, guards, and even modern visitors insist they have seen her again. Not as a figure in history books, but as a silent, headless woman drifting across Tower Green, the same spot where she died. They describe a presence that chills the air, a figure that glides rather than walks, sometimes carrying her head in her hands. One official account, one impossible sighting. Both tied forever to the Tower of London. Quick pause. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. It's always wild to see these sleepless stories circle the globe. Because tonight, we're not just walking through history, we're stepping into a place where stone walls keep secrets, where the cries of children echo without a source, and where some of England's most powerful ghosts refuse to rest. The Tower of London isn't just a fortress. It isn't just a prison. For centuries, it has been the stage for coronations, betrayals, disappearances, and executions. And through all of it, stories of hauntings have clung to its stones like ivy, refusing to let go. In this story, we'll move between two of its most unsettling legends, the tragic queen who lost her head but not her presence, and the two young princes whose fate remains one of England's darkest mysteries. As you hear their stories, I want you to imagine the tower at night. The massive gates sealed shut, the Thames lapping quietly at the outer wall, and inside, corridors where every step echoes back at you. Where shadows stretch longer than they should, and where silence can feel heavier than noise. We'll start with the history, because history always leaves its fingerprints. But soon, we'll drift into something else, the footsteps that shouldn't be there, the whispers with no speaker, the sightings that force even skeptics to look twice. This is the Tower of London, where England's past is carved in blood, and where some say the dead walk still. And tonight, you and I will walk there together. Before we step into the hauntings, we need to understand the place itself. Because the Tower of London is more than just a backdrop, it's the reason these stories cling so tightly. Imagine the year 1066. William the Conqueror had just seized the English crown. To make his power permanent, he needed more than soldiers. He needed a symbol, a fortress so intimidating it would silence rebellion before it could begin. And so, on the north bank of the Thames, he built the first stone keep. The White Tower rose above London like a warning, this is no longer yours. It belongs to me. For nearly 1,000 years since, the tower has been everything England required it to be. A fortress. A royal palace. A prison. An execution ground. A treasury and even a zoo. Its walls have witnessed both coronations and betrayals, weddings and murders. At dawn, the tower gleams like pale gold in the sun. But at midnight, its stones seem darker, as if they have absorbed centuries of secrets. And there are many. Within these walls, monarchs plotted against rivals, traitors begged for mercy, and prisoners scratched last words into the stone. Every archway has a story. Every staircase could be a trap. And every locked door, you can't help but wonder, who last stood behind it? But the tower isn't just history, it's a place of endings. When you entered as a prisoner, especially under the Tudors, you rarely walked out alive. Tower Green, just inside the walls, saw executions that shaped the destiny of England itself. Queens, lords, and soldiers, people whose names still echo in our history books, met the axe here. And those deaths, some say, left more than scars on the ground. They left something that refuses to move on. Visitors often describe the tower as unnaturally heavy. Not in weight, but in atmosphere. Step through the gates, and it feels colder, quieter, as though the air itself carries the memory of centuries. Guards who patrol its halls say the silence can press against your chest like an invisible hand. Which brings us back to why we're here. Because wherever there is pain, secrecy, and unfinished stories, there are hauntings. And the Tower of London has more unfinished stories than almost anywhere else in the world. History leaves us its records. But hauntings, they slip in through the cracks, surfacing in moments people can't quite explain. And at the Tower of London, those cracks appeared early. Long before the age of ghost tours and paranormal TV shows, the men and women who lived and worked inside these walls began whispering of things unseen. Night watchmen spoke of footsteps trailing behind them, the scrape of boots on stone, only to turn and find the corridor empty. Prisoners, kept in isolation, claimed they heard soft crying at night. Some even swore a hand brushed across their skin in the darkness, though no guard had entered their cell. By the 18th and 19th centuries, when the tower was opening to curious visitors, these whispers had grown into stories that spread far beyond its gates. Victorian London was a city in love with the Gothic, and tourists came not just to see the crown jewels or the White Tower's stark walls, but to test their courage in a place where so many had died. It was during these years that the tower's first famous ghost took shape. Anne Boleyn, already immortalized in history, was said to walk at night near Tower Green. Arbella Stuart, a cousin of King James I who perished within these walls, was seen gliding through her old chambers. And then there were the children, soft laughter echoing near the Bloody Tower, though no children lived there anymore. One guard in the 1800s recorded a particularly unsettling night. While stationed near the Salt Tower, he heard a child's giggle. Thinking a visitor had wandered too far, he raised his lantern. But the light fell only on the bare stones, and the laughter faded into silence. He refused to take that post again. Not all the stories were passed down by soldiers or tourists. Royal figures, too, hinted at the tower's restless nature. Letters from the Tudor court suggest that even noble prisoners reported sleepless nights, disturbed by shadows moving across their chambers or by sounds of dragging chains in hallways that should have been empty. Skeptics dismissed these claims as imagination, fear, or the tricks of candlelight. But the accounts didn't stop. They only multiplied. And that raises a question we'll carry through this journey. If so many voices, from different centuries, describe the same sensations, the cold rush of unseen movement, the cries of unseen children, can we so easily dismiss them? As the years passed, the strange signs became stories too vivid to ignore. Some of them attached themselves to specific names, specific tragedies. And soon, one figure would rise above all others, the queen whose life ended in silence, but whose spirit, they say, still walks the Tower Green. When people speak of the Tower of London's ghosts, certain names rise again and again. Names etched in history, but also whispered in candlelit corridors long after their deaths. These are the souls said to linger where they suffered most. The first, of course, is Anne Boleyn. Her execution in 1536 is one of the tower's most infamous moments. Some witnesses claimed she died bravely, praying softly as the French swordsman struck the fatal blow. But her story didn't end there. Guards and visitors alike tell of her apparition drifting silently across Tower Green. Some see her headless form, her hands clasped as though in prayer, gliding past the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where her body was buried hastily beneath the floor. Others describe her whole figure, face pale, eyes fixed forward, pacing the grounds where she waited for death. In nearly every version, there is no sound. Only silence heavy enough to make the heart race. Then, there are the two young princes, Edward V and his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury. Locked away in the Bloody Tower in 1483, their fate remains one of England's greatest mysteries. Officially, their disappearance was never solved. But legends tell of two boys in white nightshirts, seen hand in hand near the stone staircase, or peering from the windows of the Bloody Tower. Some say their faces are pale but peaceful, as though unaware of the centuries that have passed. Others claim they vanish mid-step, leaving only the echo of laughter on the air. Another restless figure said to remain here is Lady Arbella Stuart, cousin to King James I. Denied permission to marry the man she loved, Arbella wasted away in captivity within the tower. Visitors have described a sorrowful woman moving like smoke through her old rooms, her presence cold and fleeting, her story unfinished. There are more, of course. The tower is heavy with names: Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, who was dragged screaming to the scaffold, Guy Fawkes, interrogated within its walls, even the spectral bear said to haunt the Martin Tower, perhaps a trace of the royal menagerie once kept here. Each one adds another layer of fear, another possibility that the tower's stones are not empty after dark. But if there is one place within these walls that seems to breathe with unease, it is the Bloody Tower. Narrow, shadowed, and steeped in tragedy, it has become the beating heart of the tower's ghost stories. It is here, many believe, that the spirits of the lost princes remain. And soon we'll step inside. Because while the tower's grounds whisper of queens and courtiers, it is in the Bloody Tower where history's silence grows loudest. A cold breeze in a hallway can be ignored. A flicker of shadow might be explained away. But what happens when the same strange moments are witnessed again and again, across centuries? That is the story of the Tower of London. By the late 1800s, the reports had become impossible to dismiss. Guards stationed on the night watch, the famous yeoman warders, or beefeaters, began recording their encounters officially. Men sworn to duty, trained in discipline, found themselves rattled by sights they could not understand. One of the most chilling accounts came from a soldier standing sentry outside the Martin Tower. He reported that a massive, spectral bear lunged at him from the shadows. Terrified, he thrust his bayonet forward, and the blade passed through empty air. When his fellow guards rushed to his side, they found him trembling, unable to speak. That soldier died 2 days later of shock. Was it coincidence? Or did the tower's ghosts claim another victim? And then there was the White Tower itself, the fortress's ancient heart. Workers and visitors alike spoke of invisible hands gripping their shoulders as they climbed its spiral staircases. Some described the sudden smell of burning candles where no flame had been lit. Others heard murmurs in languages long dead, Latin prayers, whispered in the dark. But the Bloody Tower, that is where things grew truly unsettling. More than one yeoman has admitted to hearing children's voices near the stairs where the princes were last seen alive. Laughter, soft and fleeting, echoing in the dead of night. One guard swore he saw 2 small figures, dressed in white nightclothes, standing in the shadows. As he approached, they melted into nothing. He never volunteered for that post again. Even tourists, in more recent years, add to the legend. Some claim their cameras refuse to work in certain rooms. Others report the sensation of being watched, followed, or brushed by an unseen hand. The Bloody Tower, they say, feels alive. And perhaps strangest of all are the sightings of Anne Boleyn. She does not appear once, or twice, but dozens of times, always on the anniversary of her death. Guards describe her walking calmly, even gracefully, across Tower Green. But always, headless. Her silent figure a reminder that history does not sleep easily. Skeptics, of course, argue these are tricks of light, the brain misfiring in a place already heavy with dread. But the yeoman warders, stoic men of service, not given to flights of fancy, stand by their claims. Which brings us to the question I leave with you: if disciplined soldiers, tourists, and workers across different eras all describe the same scenes, are we still so certain they are imagining it? Comment below. Do you believe multiple witnesses can strengthen a ghost story? Or do you think mass suggestion explains it away? The Bloody Tower. Even its name sends a chill through anyone who has studied the Tower of London. Narrow, shadowed, its stones darkened by centuries of mystery. It was here, in 1483, that Edward V and his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury vanished from history. 2 boys locked behind walls that would never release them alive. Official records are frustratingly sparse. Edward and Richard were last seen being led into the tower by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who claimed he was acting to protect them. Days turned into weeks, then months, and the world outside the tower began to whisper about murder. Yet no one ever found their bodies. Not until 1674, when workmen discovered 2 small skeletons beneath a stairwell, bones later reinterred in Westminster Abbey, thought by some to be the princes. But the tower has never let go of their story. Over the centuries, visitors, guards, and historians have reported hearing the soft sounds of children at play, their laughter echoing in the empty halls of the Bloody Tower. Shadows flicker in the corners of rooms long abandoned, Cold spots, sudden chills, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched are all reported by those who tread these stone floors at night. Some say the boys' spirits appear as they were in life, pale, in simple white garments, hands clasped or linked together, faces serene but eyes searching. Others insist the sight is fleeting, a ghostly form vanishing the moment it is seen, leaving only an echo of laughter or the sense of someone standing too close. Modern investigations, too, have recorded strange phenomena. Cameras fail inexplicably, temperature sensors plunge in moments, and EVP recordings capture faint, childlike voices when no one is present. YouTube paranormal teams and dedicated historians note that these occurrences are most frequent near the stairwell where the 1674 skeletons were found. Could this be the residual energy of their tragic fate? Or something else entirely, an imprint of trauma so deep that centuries cannot erase it? And then, there is the new archival clue discovered in 2024. Tim Thornton of the Missing Princess Project found a reference to a chain belonging to Edward V, recorded in a 16th century will. This small, tangible link to history suggests that even in death, threads of their lives remain, buried in documents that time has forgotten. Such discoveries deepen the mystery, merging historical fact with haunting legend, and making the tower a place where the line between life and death feels disturbingly thin. The psychological effect on visitors is palpable. Tourists often report an unshakable unease in the Bloody Tower, a sense of being watched, a pressure on the chest, whispers that seem almost intelligible but always fade before meaning can form. Guards, who patrol these halls for months at a time, speak of unease that grows heavier as night deepens. And yet, the prince's story isn't just one of horror, it's also a tale of enduring presence. The tower, in its silent cruelty, has preserved their memory. Every flicker of light in a darkened hallway, every shadow darting past an ancient archway, every echo of laughter keeps them with us in a way history alone cannot. He opened the door to the Bloody Tower, and what he saw was enough to make him question everything he thought he knew about history. But before I tell you, I want to know, have you ever felt a presence in a place where no one should be? Tell me below. Every legend grows stronger with scrutiny, and the Tower of London has never lacked investigators. From Tudor chroniclers to modern paranormal teams, countless people have tried to separate history from haunting. Some succeed in clarifying facts, others only deepen the mystery. Historians like Dominic Mancini and later chroniclers provide careful, though sometimes conflicting, records of the prince's disappearance. Scholars debate motives, timelines, and credibility, but none can provide absolute closure. Modern researchers, including Tim Thornton and the Missing Princess Project, have added a layer of forensic and archival rigor. The 2024 discovery of Edward V's chain in a 16th century will, for example, offers a tangible connection to the boys, proof that even centuries later, the tower guards its secrets closely. Skeptics, naturally, have their say. They point to the tower's architecture, narrow halls, uneven stone floors, flickering candlelight, all perfect for optical illusions and auditory distortions. The human brain, primed to notice patterns in shadow and sound, can create apparitions out of ordinary stimuli. Echoes bouncing along stone corridors may mimic footsteps, drafts through ancient windows may carry whispers. Paranormal investigators note, however, that the tower's reports often defy these explanations. Cameras malfunction in ways that can't be simulated. EVPs capture voices that are consistently childlike, and temperature readings drop sharply in isolated locations. Even trained skeptics have described sudden feelings of pressure, unease, or being watched, reactions difficult to ascribe purely to imagination. Victorian accounts provide early examples of these tensions. Guards and visitors reported phenomena that today might be explained scientifically, but at the time, they were interpreted as supernatural. Modern studies confirm the consistency. The locations of reported activity often overlap, most notably around Tower Green and the Bloody Tower. Whether one believes in spirits or energy imprints, patterns emerge that cannot be dismissed entirely. Then there are archival anomalies. Letters and court documents hint at unexplained behaviors, a guard reporting shadows moving independently, or scribbled notes from prisoners describing sounds that no one else could hear. When considered alongside modern claims, a curious pattern forms. The tower has long been more than a collection of stones. It is a magnet for stories, for unexplained phenomena that challenge our sense of reality. Yet the strongest investigations are those that combine history, psychology, and folklore. By examining primary sources, the skeletons found in 1674, letters, official chronicles, alongside modern witness accounts, one begins to see why the tower maintains its reputation. It is not merely a haunted location in the sense of horror stories. It is a place where history itself feels alive, where absence and presence overlap, and where fact and legend are inseparable. Even the skeptics leave with a shiver. Time and again, disciplined researchers, upon walking the tower's corridors, admit to an unexplainable weight in the air. Some, after repeated investigations, report sensory impressions that leave them questioning whether all that they see is entirely natural. The tower, it seems, allows no observer to remain neutral. And it is this tension between the factual and the inexplicable that makes its hauntings so compelling, and so terrifying. When it comes to the Tower of London, facts tell part of the story, but eyewitnesses bring it to life. Across centuries, people of every walk of life have reported experiences that defy explanation. Soldiers, guards, historians, and curious tourists all share a recurring thread: the sense that someone, or something, is always present in the tower's stone corridors. Take the Victorian tourists, for example. In 1880, a visitor recorded seeing a pale figure crossing Tower Green in the dead of night. She described a woman in regal attire, walking slowly toward the scaffold, yet when she called out, there was no answer. The figure vanished before her eyes, leaving only a chilling cold in its place. The account was dismissed as imagination by some contemporaries, but others documented similar sightings, lending eerie consistency. Guards stationed in the Bloody Tower often speak in hushed tones of children's laughter echoing through the halls. They describe sudden drops in temperature, lights flickering, and the sensation of being followed along corridors that should be empty. Some recount seeing two small figures in white nightshirts, standing hand in hand, only to vanish when approached. These children are widely believed to be Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, eternally trapped in the tower's shadow. Modern paranormal teams and YouTube investigators continue to add to the records. Cameras mysteriously fail, EVPs pick up whispering voices, and temperature sensors plunge inexplicably. One researcher, recording near Tower Green late at night, reported feeling the unmistakable brush of an invisible hand across his arm. When he turned, nothing, or no one, was there. His video footage, analyzed frame by frame, revealed only shadows that did not correspond to any physical object. But it's not only physical sensations that haunt witnesses. Many report a psychological presence, an oppressive weight on the chest, an instinctual feeling that the tower is observing them. Even the most skeptical observers admit that while the tower is full of history, these moments create a connection to something beyond the records: the unresolved fears, hopes, and tragedies of the past. Historical diaries also reveal similar experiences. In 1603, a tower servant wrote about seeing a headless woman walking across the courtyard during the night. He described how her hands appeared to hold something invisible, and how the air turned icy as she passed. His entry was buried among mundane records, but it bears a striking resemblance to modern reports of Anne Boleyn's ghost. Even visitors today report fleeting glimpses: a flash of white at the corner of the eye, a cold rush across the room, footsteps echoing when no one is near. Cameras capture unexplained orbs of light, shadowy figures, and distorted silhouettes. Every testimony, whether written in a Victorian journal or recorded on a smartphone, adds layers to the tower's haunted tapestry. The consistency is remarkable. Across 500 years, across generations and continents of visitors, similar patterns emerge: cold spots, whispers, laughter, fleeting shadows, headless apparitions. The tower's ghosts, if they exist, are not random, they are persistent. And it is these voices that bring the tower to life in ways history alone cannot. They tell us that even in stone corridors and sealed rooms, something lingers. Something that refuses to be forgotten. Hauntings are more than stories. They are often tied to objects that carry memory, emotion, and sometimes tragedy. At the Tower of London, the past is not only recorded in documents or whispered in corridors. It lingers in artifacts, relics, and objects that seem to hold echoes of those who once touched them. Take Anne Boleyn, for instance. Fragments of her possessions survive in various museums: a rosary, a prayer book, and even scraps of her clothing. Visitors to the tower report a strange energy near Tower Green where she was executed, a chill that seems to radiate from the very spot where she fell. Some believe that objects she held or touched retained some essence of her final moments, and that these imprints are detectable by those sensitive to the tower's energy. The Bloody Tower itself holds physical reminders of its tragic occupants. Stairwells and floors bear marks of centuries, scuffs, scratches, and worn stone steps. While ordinary wear can explain some of this, investigators point out that many of these marks align with eyewitness accounts of spectral figures' movements. Could the energy of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury remain in these spaces, etched into the very fabric of the building? Some researchers think so. Even more tangible is the 1674 discovery of two small skeletons beneath a stairwell in the Bloody Tower. Thought to be the missing princes, these bones were reinterred in Westminster Abbey. Yet, the site remains a locus of chilling reports. Nighttime visitors often feel sudden drops in temperature, hear whispers of children, and occasionally glimpse pale forms in the shadows. The tower guards believe that energy lingers where trauma was concentrated, giving weight to centuries-old accounts of ghostly activity. Other objects, like the iron chains and manacles once used on prisoners, add to the tower's mystique. Modern paranormal teams report sudden temperature fluctuations or odd electromagnetic readings near these artifacts. Could these instruments of suffering act as conduits, carrying the emotions of the past forward? Many witnesses think so, claiming that holding or approaching these objects heightens the sensation of a presence, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming. Even documents, letters, and official records can serve as relics of haunting. A guard's 18th-century diary described a cold hand on his shoulder while he read in the Bloody Tower. In 2024, researchers uncovered a chain once belonging to Edward V in a forgotten will, proof that tangible connections to these spirits persist. These items bridge the gap between history and the spectral, creating a chain of evidence that feels as alive as the tower itself. It is easy to dismiss the tower's hauntings as folklore, imagination, or optical illusion. But the combination of eyewitness accounts, artifacts, and physical evidence creates a layered puzzle. Each element supports the others. Shadows correspond to objects, voices coincide with locations, and history intersects with haunting in ways that resist simple explanation. The tower's objects, silent witnesses to centuries of intrigue and death, whisper stories of their own. And as we move forward, we will see not only the ghosts themselves, but the cultural and psychological impact these stories have had over the centuries. How a place, frozen in time, can shape fear, fascination, and human imagination for generations. The Tower of London is not only a building of stone and mortar, it is a symbol, a repository of England's darkest histories and deepest fears. Its ghosts are more than apparitions. They are reflections of our collective fascination with power, betrayal, and the unknown. For centuries, writers, historians, and artists have turned to the tower for inspiration. From Shakespeare's Richard III to modern novels and films, the disappearances of the princes and the tragic death of Anne Boleyn have been retold again and again. These stories blur the lines between documented history and legend, reminding us that the tower does not belong solely to the past. It lives in our imagination. The psychological impact is undeniable. Tourists report feelings of unease that linger long after leaving the tower walls. Guards speak of tension in the corridors, a heaviness that seems to press on the chest during night shifts. Historians admit that, while they can analyze documents and skeletons, there remains a persistent question: why do these stories feel so alive, even centuries later? The tower's hauntings have also shaped public perception of history itself. Anne Boleyn is not merely a figure in a history book, she is a cautionary ghost, a symbol of injustice and betrayal. The princes, lost to time, represent innocence trapped within the machinery of power. Their stories provoke empathy, fear, and endless speculation, demonstrating how ghost stories can serve as vessels for societal memory. Even modern media contributes to this legacy. Paranormal documentaries, YouTube videos, and ghost tours all reinforce the tower's spectral reputation. Visitors approach the walls with anticipation, expecting a thrill, and often leaving with a profound sense of connection to centuries-old tragedy. The tower, in this way, becomes both a historical site and a living theater for human emotion. And the psychological impact is intimate, too. People report vivid dreams after visiting, sudden chills in unrelated locations, or a haunting sense that the past is closer than it should be. The tower teaches us that some stories refuse to stay buried, that trauma, injustice, and mystery have a persistence that echoes through time. Which brings us to another chilling consideration. He opened the door to the nursery, and what he saw ended his career forever. But before I tell you, I want to know, have you ever been so scared you quit your job, or left a place immediately, feeling something invisible was watching you? Tell me below. The tower's stories are not just tales, they are invitations. They ask us to step closer, to feel the weight of history, to consider that some presences may never leave. And as we move into the final section, we confront the ultimate question of the tower's hauntings. Why do these spirits persist, and what would it mean if they were still truly among us? As we reach the end of our journey through the Tower of London, it is worth pausing to reflect. Every stone, every hallway, every shadowed corner carries centuries of human emotion, power, betrayal, fear, and grief. Some of it is history, recorded in ink and stone. Some of it, however, is something else entirely. Something that lingers beyond written records. Anne Boleyn, walking silently across Tower Green, her headless form a tragic reminder of ambition and mortality. The two lost princes, pale figures in white nightshirts, forever caught between life and legend. Guards, tourists, and researchers alike have sensed their presence, and artifacts such as Edward V's chain or the worn stairwells of the Bloody Tower serve as anchors for the lingering energy of the past. These hauntings are not mere stories, they are living echoes. They remind us that the past never fully departs. That injustice, fear, and tragedy imprint themselves in ways that humans cannot entirely comprehend. And perhaps that is why the tower's legends remain so potent, because they are, in some sense, still alive. The Tower of London continues to draw visitors, scholars, and thrill-seekers. Yet even today, those who step into its halls cannot escape the sense that they are being watched, that the tower remembers. And for those who have spent the night wandering its corridors, the feeling is undeniable. Some presences never leave. And so, we arrive at the question that hangs in the shadows, the sleepless question, the one that lingers long after the lights go out and the tower gates have closed. If you ever had to spend a night there, would you keep the lights off or would you run? Think carefully before answering. Because in the tower, centuries of restless souls are always listening,